3, 2, 1. And we welcome you in. And yes, one of the founding fathers of 7-on-7, that is Hall of Famer and Baytown Lee legend, Dick Olin. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. Thanks, Chuck. It's a great day. Father's Day was super, and now this is good.
Oh, I'm glad you had a great Father's Day for sure. So speaking of father, you were kind of a founding father going with that theme.
Yeah.
The original 7-on-7 back in 1996. Talk about how that happened.
Well, it's ironic in that where it came from and how we got everything. You know, Mike White was a California head football coach. He came to the University of Illinois. He brought 7-on-7 to Illinois. Then he left and John Makovic took over. And then when he came to Texas, you know, Randy Rogers was on his staff. He came, and those guys had been doing 7-on-7 in their Illinois camps. And Dan Rochar, now the coach, the O-line coach for the Saints, he called me and said, Coach, he said, call Illinois because they did 7-on-7. It was great. So Randy sent us the rules. We got the rules. I then divided the city of Houston in quadrants. At that time, we didn't have the cell phones and all those things. So, you know, I called people, I sent them letters and so on, said, hey, we're going to have a meeting at the Holiday Inn on Highway 6 over in the west side of Houston off I-10. And so a bunch of guys came. I handed out the rules. We talked about it. And then at that time, the GHFCA, the Greater Houston Football Coaches Association, we had a combine. And it was at the University of Houston. And University of Houston had just built that new indoor facility, which they no longer use for football. Excuse me, but we went down there. We had our combine. Then after the combine, we had another show to show everybody what 7-on-7 was. Mm-hmm. And during that time, we had Les Kenning and Cy Creek. They played Steve Van Meter's team, Friendswood. Wayne Hooks from Cy Falls played our team from Baytown Lee. And we played a game. And Ron Doak brought in officials. They had the rules ahead of time. They looked at it after we played. It was a demonstration. After we played, we met in a little room at U of H, went over all the rules, and then we decided what needed to, you know, we needed to, you know, get better at, what we needed to change and so on. And it was a great meeting. And then it all began. And the biggest issue that we had at that time, finding a field and then allowing someone, you know, insurance. We need to have insurance. Obviously. And I said, there's two guys that were instrumental, Alan King, who was our chief financial officer, and the athletic director in Baytown and Goose Creek. They said, we'll get insurance. And they said, you can use our field. So the custodians, they mowed the fields. They were huge fields. It wasn't beautiful grass, but it was grass. And then my staff and I, we put all the markings down and we did everything. And we had that first tournament. We had 32 teams. And the biggest issue that we had was the porta cans. I didn't realize how important that was. But we opened up Stalwart Stadium across the street. And the women and the men, it was no problem. There were a lot of trees, but the women had to walk across the street to Stalwart to use the facilities. And then when they got over there were no lights. So that was a bad situation. And that was something that we heard about. But we had 8 fields. So the next time we had a 7-on-7, which was the following week, we had 2 porta cans per field. So we resolved that issue. But I never knew how important that was, you know. But when I heard these ladies talk to me and, were they not happy? So I apologized profusely and I learned from my mistakes so it wouldn't happen again.
Well, most would think if that's your biggest issue and that's your biggest problem, that you're doing pretty well, right?
Well, yeah, for that first go round, that was all that there was. And then the other thing that became a big issue was the 4-second clock. Right. You know, we didn't have a clock at that time. It was just like basketball. They count it with their hands. Well, some guys go real fast. Some guys go slow. The coaches, the parents, that's all they yelled about was 4 seconds. So once again, we met with Ron Doak. What can we do to alleviate this? So we got the stopwatch. And so the stopwatch came in. And so what happens now when the center snaps the ball? You start the watch. Mm-hmm. Once the ball is released, You stop it and you look downfield. If it's over you look at your watch after you let the play go after they've tagged the kid. You look at your watch. If it's over 4 seconds, bring it back. So all you got to do is watch the snap and watch the release and look at your watch, but you let it go. And so that helped out a lot, because then, the officials could just hold up a watch and say 4 seconds. Nobody could argue with that. It didn't become like a swimming deal have you ever been to a swim meet with parents?
Oh, yeah.
They got 4 watches, they're timing everybody and everything. It didn't become quite that bad, but we still had some parents that would, they're going to time with the officials. So, but that's just all part of it. But it was a great time. And again, we got all that through from California to Illinois to us in Texas. And Randy Rogers was very instrumental.
Well, talk about then in 1998, we got the state championship, right?
Yeah, and Bobby Burton called and asked me what I thought. And the second year, Texas City hosted, Cy Creek hosted a tournament, Cy Falls hosted a tournament, we hosted a tournament. So it kind of began that way. And then eventually Friendswood had them and so on. And they were kind of going all the way around. But when Bobby Burton called, he said, what do you think about a state tournament? I said, that would be great. Going to have it in Texas City, at Texas A&M. And John Heitke, very instrumental with the whole thing, the whole beginning, because of his affiliation with Fox. And he kind of, I think, was a sports director or CEO of Fox. And he got that thing all pushed through. We got it at A&M. It was great. Mm-hmm. And that first year we had, I believe, 32 teams is what came there. And we played on the drill team fields or whatever. I can't even remember where they were. But, it was a long day. And the way in which that was organized is that you would play a game and then you would rest a game and then you would play a game and so on. And, our kids were used to playing and playing and playing. They played 3 in the morning and then they would break. If you're fortunate to get in a championship, you play in the afternoon. But they did it that way. And then from there, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger.
Well, obviously, it's Texas, it's football. It's going to be big anyway. But as has happened with the other sports, soccer comes to mind because the clubs in soccer have had instances where kids have opted out of playing for the high school teams and only play for their, soccer teams or the club soccer teams. Volleyball in Texas is huge, but it's kind of had the same thing. I guess this was coming, the elite clubs, if you will, for 7-on-7, and that's changed the game. And I'm guessing that's not what you guys had in mind.
No, not at all. And the other thing that's happened, when we first began, your center was your center. Your linebackers were your linebackers. So our defense played our defense. Our offense was run by our quarterbacks. And then everything kind of became, I called it, they bastardized the game, and that the backup quarterback is now hiking the ball. Then they bring in extra DBs to play linebacker, which was not the intent. That's not what you wanted to do, in my opinion. And there are a lot of people now that would like to go back to what it was rather than what this is. But, once that got out of hand, then you see people snapping the ball at the side. You're doing things you don't do in a game. And we wanted to do that. And then the other thing, is that you'll see people all get together around the center and then they break out. And you're not going to have that in a game. No. So we tried to implement rules where you had, tackle to tackle. You had to get into normal formation and so on like that. So those are things that helped out. But I think that whole situation of elite and everything else began on the West Coast and the East Coast. And I don't know what good things start on those coasts, but that infiltrated us. And so those people came. And so you see these, we call them street agents, these guys that go around and they sell themselves to these various kids, telling them they can get scholarships, come and play with me. But, the reality is that they can't, unless, I've been out of it long enough where maybe they can, but I don't think so, because they don't have access to transcripts or anything else to get a kid in school. Mm-hmm. And so, you got these street agents peddling their merchants, and they're telling these kids all these things, and kids are missing track meets, missing baseball games to go participate in these elite teams. And that's just not the intent. And, the sad thing is that when I came to Texas in 1983, you could not participate on an outside entity if you were involved in your high school's teams. And so now that's kind of just gone all by the wayside. Soccer kids play high school and they play an elite or club or whatever, same in volleyball. And you got it in baseball, you got the elite teams and select and all of those things. And so, kids never get to stop. They go continually. And, we had that season where 7-on-7 and then it was over. Now, I guess in UIL, you can work with your kids for an hour every day. You can run your offense, you can do all those things. So it's basically become year round. And I do remember Charles Breidup saying that. He said, eventually this is going to become a year round thing, which is not what it was intended to be. Not in the least. You play some games, you qualify for the state tournament, have it, now you're gone. And you don't see the kids. And, I didn't require my coaches to come to weight training all the time. No, we had 2 guys that were paid and then I was always there. Then I asked my coaches, I said, sign up for a week. Just come in for a week. You don't have to sit up here all the time. I do want you to contact your kids. And that was one thing I just asked them to do. But I don't care. Kids will come, but then kids will miss. Now, there are certain schools where they all do it. But the majority of them, you don't have 100% or 70%. I mean, people go on vacations, people do a lot of things. So, that's just kind of gotten where it is. But, I'm not a fan of that elite. I'm not a fan of any of those things because no matter what level or what sport, it's gotten out of hand. And the other thing, too, is like you have AAU basketball where these coaches will tell kids, well, now, look, if you guys all go over here to this school, you're going to have a heck of a team. And that's going to start happening in football. They're going to take kids. Well, now, wait a minute. This team over here is a great quarterback. They just need a couple of receivers. Go over there. And, I know we have a PAPF that you have to sign a previous athletic participation form, but there's all kinds of ways around that. And I guess one of the things I just heard about, I didn't even realize this, but if a kid said he's homeless, then he can go basically anywhere. So, that's just, there's always ways around it. And no matter what the safeguards are, somebody will find a way to get something around that loophole. But, I think 7-on-7 is a great thing. I know they've made some changes and they're going to have the tournament this weekend. But I just wish you could get away from the elite. I wish the UIL, since they've opened these things up, let the coaches coach it.
Right.
Let them be there. Coaches are on the sideline in the end zone now. But they can control the kids so you don't have anything that escalates and gets out of hand. Coaches can
Right. Well, real quick, talk about the quarterbacks that you observed that have benefited from 7-on-7, especially in the early days.
Well, there's so many. I mean, the ones that we had, like we had Al Roberson III who played at K-State, and then my son Drew and Brian Johnson, Jeremy Moses, and so on. But, there was a boy named Ballard, I think Ballard from Friendswood. There's just so many of them. And then, Todd had several at Southlake, and they really become good 7-on-7 quarterbacks, good throwers, and so on. And I think that they've escalated it. I can't remember, but I believe that there is a Texas quarterback on every NFL team, every NFL roster. And, the Stafford, he played 7-on-7. All those guys did. And it's a fun activity and it keeps you sharp. So, there's a lot of benefits to it from that, but it's also good receivers as well. We're very fortunate to have great skill in Texas. And this just allows you to develop. And I'm not a big fan of all these quarterback gurus and camps and all of that stuff. No, good Lord. You can't take a boy who's 11 or 12 years old and say he's going to be a D1 guy. No idea. But people pay a lot of money to do that stuff. But the thing has benefited so many people so much from 7-on-7.
And speaking of that, we thank you and all the founders of 7-on-7 for bringing it, because obviously it has benefited a lot of people and also showcases the great talent of Texas.
Oh, there's no question. And it's getting out all over the country. People are doing it everywhere. They all play by different rules. But yet people still search our website. Brandon Houston is the webmaster. He puts everything up and people can get in there. And I believe it's State 7-on-7. And they can get in there and see all the rules and the changes. And I know one of the changes that they've done, which is a good change, I think. The games were 20 minutes with a 10-minute half. Now it's a 15-minute half. They just kind of reset the ball a little bit, give it a little break, then start the second half. So it's 15 and 15, which shortens the game. And you know how hot it is now, over 100 degrees everywhere. That's a good thing. You know, that's a real good thing.
Absolutely. Dick Olin, thank you so much for your time. Kudos, and we will talk to you soon.
Good deal. Thanks, Chuck. Appreciate it.